And so we were talking in the spillover, the crossover, Kenny, about Eric Bieniemy, and I wanted to ask your opinion or your insight on the difference between being, I guess, a two-part question, being an offensive coordinator versus say like an offensive defense of head coach, who calls plays, and really how much of it is a really a big deal considering the success Eric Bieniemy has had everywhere he's been.
I think they both do it. I
Right.
think they tag team it. I'm sure they both sit down and collaborate. This play will work here. This play will work there. But I'm sure both of them go in their
Right.
office and draw plays how they think was going to work against their next opponent.
Sure.
I just think he's getting a short end of the deal because everybody keeps saying Andy Reid's calling plays. Andy
Right.
Reid's calling plays. But if you look at it, they're both talking to each other.
Right.
They're on the headsets talking to each other.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask you that about Eric Bieniemy. Do you think his success obviously is exploded at Kansas City is hurting him to becoming a head coach because he's not able to really truly interview because they're always in the AFC Championship or in the Super Bowl. In this case, obviously winning. So essentially, a lot of the jobs are filled by when he's still working.
No,
No.
Philadelphia Eagles,
Yeah.
OC and DC,
Yeah.
they landed jobs
Quick.
quickly.
Yeah.
So
I mean, we obviously know there's different dynamics too. And here's what people don't understand. There was a head coach for the Minnesota Vikings by the name of Brad Childress.
Brad Childress.
He's actually like the equivalent of Bill Callahan up in Minnesota. He called himself Chili.
Mm-hmm.
That's what his nickname was. He's the one that kind of setting forth to get rid of Dante Culpepper and go with Christian Ponder, and then kind of held his head above water and got Brett Favre. Essentially, that was Spielman doing it. But he came from Philly with Andy Reid.
Mm-hmm.
I think Andy Reid. Um, he never had called plays. Offensive coordinator by name. Andy Reid was the 100% play caller. So when people say that, it's just an excuse because people forget that.
Yes.
Now, also the old Chicago Bears head coach, who's now back as their quarterback coach. That um, he was an offensive coordinator. He was probably more of an offensive coordinator or quarterback coach, and he ended up being Chicago Bears head coach. But Eric Bieniemy has been designing some of the plays because the razzmatazz plays that they did, that's Eric Bieniemy.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember back last year when they ran a play from like 1938 Army? It was like a wing T formation. Yes. Remember that, Austin? Eric Bieniemy found that just from watching, like, and he saw it, and then he said, "I'm going to put it in." And if you don't think Eric Bieniemy and Andy Reid are lock and step, because Andy Reid, if you really watch the dynamics of it, isn't really calling all the plays. He's kind of foreseeing it. Now, granted, I'm sure he's overseeing it,
Mm-hmm.
and they're getting some great partnership. But also, it lets you know that there was some friction there at times. And I want to ask you about this. I think sometimes good friction among a coaching staff turns out like diamonds, because that's what you get from it. Because it's not personal. I think there's times where he had to tighten up Patrick Mahomes before halftime. I think when they were out playing the Chargers one time, there was talk that Eric Bieniemy wouldn't be back. Andy Reid brought him back. Obviously won a Super Bowl because they felt like Tyreek Hill being gone and could possibly just go in another direction. Talk about sometimes either from personal experience or what just from being in the coaching field about sometimes I guess you call it friction or just back and forth or banter. I think it's good. What's your opinion?
It's really good. I think if both parties know it's for the benefit of the team,
right,
it's good.
right.
But if there's egos involved, then
Or it's
or
personal.
if it's personal,
right,
like if you and I were co-defensive coordinators,
right,
we both at the beginning we say, "Hey, this is how we're going to do it."
right,
We're not going to agree on everything.
right.
We won't.
Shouldn't.
We shouldn't.
We shouldn't think
because
alike.
we don't think alike.
Right.
But if we both have that understanding
Right.
that it's not about us, it's about the team
Right.
and the players, we'll be fine.
Yeah, eventually you'll get there.
Eventually you'll get there.
Because there'll be times that your ideas will be right or work out. You actually might have a good idea or a good play, and maybe it's just not executed right.
Mm-hmm.
And vice versa. So I think that Eric Bieniemy, it's unfortunate, for him, because then they try to say you need to go down to college and do all this stuff. I think right now, for him, he's and I want to ask you this, he's in a little bit of a weird spot. Do you continue along if he's able to go back to Kansas City and kind of always being second fiddle to Andy Reid. Then they'll say, well, you got Patrick Mahomes. Are you really a good? The excuses will still be there. Or do you bet on yourself and find a way to, I don't know, I hate to even say it, work your way up with a lesser quarterback and lesser head coach?
I don't think he needs to work his way up.
No, I don't think he
I
does.
think he's a
Yeah.
proven
Oh,
commodity.
I'm not saying he's not proven, but I'm saying for him to get to where he wants to be, which is a head coach, and where he deserves to be. Because I think right now, sometimes, like with him and some other coaches, I think they will continue to push the goal line or move the goalposts. I truly do, because there's no reason when you look at his resume, and when you look even back when he was a running back coach,
Mm-hmm.
and so he was a running back coach with the Vikings when Adrian Peterson went over
Yes.
2,000 yards and was a comeback player. So his production as a position coach / offensive coordinator / assistant head coach or associate, whatever it is, associate head coach, is second to none, and has been doing it for longevity wise. Compared to the Eagles, defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator, have been what, offensive coordinators 1 or 2 years. So what do you think if you were to advise Bieniemy, right? What would you advise him to do?
You scared to address the elephant in the room?
I'm not scared to it.
Yeah.
I just think that, I mean, well, first of all, it's not an elephant in the room. There's data that shows the NFL owners ain't hiring no black coaches.
They're not hiring any black coaches.
Because here's what's the funny thing about it. It's like they have there are 3 or 4 excuses, right? One, you don't have any coordinator position experience. Well, he's a coordinator. Then it's like you got to call plays.
Mm-hmm.
That's number 2. And then it's like if you're a defensive coordinator, what they did with Steve Wilkes and Flores, well, it's an offensive league, so now we need an offensive coach. So that's the elephant in the room is not an elephant. It's not anything unknown. It's right in the face. It's whether people, now it's already there. Now I feel like sometimes especially with the NFL, you're gonna have to find a way to, like, a different way to skin the cat with it get there.
Yeah.
I mean, because you guys here's also, right. If anybody ever have a street cred card, it's probably Bruce Arians, because he had nothing but brothers on his staff. I don't know where, because he ain't got nothing but soul food up there eating on Friday. Bruce Arians was an offensive coordinator. I didn't even realize for like 20 some years, and he only got his props as a head coach is because when Pagano got sick with
leukemia.
Yeah, but Pagano got sick with leukemia, and they went on a run. That's it. So it's not just strictly to Eric Bean. I think what people don't understand about the NFL, I always tell people, they got a shelf life on you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whether you're a Jay Foreman and outlive your shelf life, or somebody that really outkicks it like Zach Thomas and ends up being a Hall of Famer, circumstances, dictate that.
Yes.
They actually pigeonhole coaches as well.
Which is sad.
Because there's a lot of white, black, and different, because there was Ed Chung that was offensive line coach.
Mm-hmm.
He got bypassed and said that, they needed to hire, minority or whatever. And he wasn't the right minority. Where there's a lot of coaches that get bypassed, right, based on being in the box. If you were to advise a young, upcoming high school coach or college coach, what do you think is more important? Who you're associated with, as far as, like, who you start to kind of be with or in their coaching tree, or going for the biggest job? Because you could go and hit a big job, the head coach get fired, then you could be lost in translation.
Yep. So with me, it's who you with. It's
Right.
who you're with.
Yeah.
Yep. Who you know.
Right.
Get with a good tree, and then try to spread your branches from there.
Right. Because when you look at Andy Reid, you look at, well, of course, Bill Belichick, those guys. You could always say the Mike, Shanahan's and all them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's kind of, they all are on to the same. They're all from Bill Walsh, and went from there. The tree is spread pretty wide, and then they've done a good job about it. I think what people don't understand as a head coach is, this is my opinion, is the best head coaches continue to coach their coaches.
Yes. And hold them accountable. Because they want them to be the best coach that they can be, regardless if Kenny goes on to be the best defensive coordinator at wherever, Kansas State, yep,
and then ends up being a head coach. They're not going to hold you back, because I think sometimes when whether they make a lot of money or it's they get too involved in themselves, they don't understand the better that their assistant coaches do. It makes them better.
Yes.
And it makes them look better. Because I feel like this coaching deal is all a cycle. You could be a head coach one day or for 5 years, get fired. Your defensive coordinator ends up, but look at D'Amico Ryans.
Yep.
Right. So Kyle Shanahan, say like D'Amico Ryans ends up being the head coach at Houston, and say he goes and ends up at the Giants and say like 6 years. Well, Kyle Shanahan might not have a head coaching job. Who do you think he's going to call to be his offensive coordinator?
D'Amico Ryan. I'll give you an example. There's a certain guy in Arizona. Cardinals, right? He had an interview for the head job, didn't get it, right? He was a head coach somewhere else. One of his assistants is up for the head coaching job now.
At Arizona. And then he in there like Flynn, or hopefully.
Well, I mean, it's up to him.
Yeah.
But that's the
way it goes.
That's the way it goes.
It's a coach of business, and it's definitely, when you really look at it, it can make or break your program. It can make or break your organization, how it's done and how it's fostered. Because I'm a firm believer that when you look at the Eagles staff, when you look at the Kansas City staff, it's the two best staffs in the nation, or in the NFL, and they're the two best well-coached teams. And they were the ones that were the most consistent. So, it's a copycat league. So you're going to go see, that doesn't mean that whoever is the next coach at the Indianapolis Colts end up going to be good, right? Because they've had, it seems like, as many coaches as the Texans have had in the last 4 years. Yeah. Frank Reich, then you got somebody else, and so forth and so on. But that's how it's spread. But that's how you create good coaches. I'm going to ask you this also before we go in our first break. In this day and time, with these young, say, college kids or young professional athletes, do you think it's better for a young coach to be the head coach, or a coach that's more seasoned, that's kind of maybe open to new, not the gristled guy that get off my lawn and I'm going to do it the same way I did it when I was in high school or college or pros, but the young, older coach that's been in these situations, that's maybe a little bit open to new ideas, but understands, probably watched 10 years worth more of football than the new coach.
I think if you're qualified, regardless of your age, you should be the guy.
Right. And yeah, I totally agree. I think I see the advantages of both. One, you want to make sure that you can kind of relate to the players, but then also you want to make sure that you have the experience to put the players in the right situation to be successful and relate to the players, all within your personality.
Yes.
I think right now, if you really looked at these two coaching staffs, and in particular the two head coaches, how they relate and talk to the players is probably 60-70% why they win.
You're talking about the Eagles and the Chiefs. Yeah. Well, Kelsey said it himself. Andy Reid pushes their buttons, but he pushes them the right way.
Right.
Not in a degrading way.
Right.
So Andy Reid probably was a degrading coach early on in his career, and then learned how to push guys' buttons without being degrading.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Or saw it how it didn't work. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I mean, I think the relationships.
The relationships.
The understand, and then also to have the calmness to not. Okay, let's just take the Philadelphia Eagles. If you would have listened to ESPN, NFL Network, they should have drafted somebody and to take Jalen Hurts' spot. That head coach had to go and stand on the table for him. To stand up to a GM, possibly, that might have been thinking about it, that actually is his boss. Howie, he's probably obviously one of the best GMs and very innovative, could have already just said, you know what, but this dude said, look, I'm the head coach. This is my guy. I will get him better. But you can't do that if you don't have if he didn't have enough relationship with Jalen Hurts to know what he's made. It's great that you can call it Nick Saban. Nick Saban there's not going to be a coach that's going to be like, yeah, man, Kenny played for me for 3, won me a national championship, was the best teammates, but he's garbage. He don't have any leadership. That's never going to happen. And he's a good kid. So that conversation ain't going to happen. So when you get to know Jalen Hurts, when you get to know Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, guys that are a little bit older, then you mix in some of the young guys, and to be able to get, Gardner Johnson as a throwaway trade with the Saints to get him, and he's a different personality. You have to have a relationship with the players, and that's what's huge. And it can't be dictated by you. It's got to be natural, and it doesn't have to be close. It's got to be, okay, when we're here, what up, Kenny? What you need? How's your family doing?
Yep.
And people don't understand how important that is.
That's very important.
Authenticity.
It's got to be authentic. Right. Yes, it has to be.
That's the next thing I'm going to ask you coming out of this break about being authentic, because I have a little of an analogy about players, and I want your opinion because you've been around more modern day players than obviously I have. So that's the first great segment after the Super Bowl. We're going to get into a little bit of team building. Kenny Whilite, Jay Foreman, old school. We'll be right back.